This podcast is meant for informational purposes only and is not meant to serve as investment advice. Hosts and guests may hold cryptocurrencies discussed in this episode. Opinions expressed may not reflect the opinions of Messari.
In 2021, Ronin's flagship game Axie Infinity propelled Web3 gaming into the global spotlight. In early May of that year, Axie was averaging 3,000 daily active users, but by November, an average of 750,000 users were playing Axie Infinity each day. The experience introduced thousands of gamers to the benefits and potential drawbacks of Web3 gaming, and when the broader crypto market crashed in 2022, Axie's highly inflationary token design was exposed, and users abandoned Axie Infinity, and to a large extent, Ronin itself. But recently, Ronin has made something of a comeback. 3 new games, Pixels, Apeiron, and Wild Forest, have each shown strong growth in the past several months, reminiscent of the early days of Axie Infinity. So the question is, what has Ronin learned from Axie's experience? And what outside factors may contribute to the success or the plateau of Ronin's rebirth? I'm Chris Davis, and here's the story.
This episode of Unqualified Opinions is brought to you by Hirechain. Your next hire could come from anywhere: a recruiter, a job board, a referral network, or a conference. Hirechain manages hundreds of candidate sources for you, so you only see relevant applications and can focus on picking the best person for your team. On average, our customers fill open roles faster and 30% cheaper than with traditional recruiters. Leading companies like The Graph and Messari already use Hirechain. So get your time back. Talk to Hirechain today and hire the best, fast. Visit hirechain.io/Messari for prioritized onboarding.
Chris, first time on the pod, welcome.
Thank you, Marcia.
Remind us of the Ronin Axie experience. Why did it catch on? What benefits did it provide by being on chain that made it so popular?
Yeah, absolutely. So Axie was really the first Web3 game to come out in a major way. This was, at the beginning of the bull run, it started to, come off and people started to join. And I think one of the main reasons that it became so popular was because of its impact in developing nations. So the Philippines was the first place that Axie really started to explode in growth. And what we saw there was that Web3 gaming provided an alternative income for these places. That was really a huge movement in the Philippines. It became so popular that the actual Department of Finance had to issue a statement on it. And I think the benefits of it being on chain were really asset ownership. This was the first time that players, Web2 gamers, and also just crypto participants were exposed to on-chain asset ownership. And the tokenization of gaming. So this was a huge advance, and even though Axie had pretty simple game mechanics, this was something that people really gravitated towards. And because of the speculation and, of so many people during the bull run, this started to compile and snowball, and the more people that made this money, the more people could, see this progressing. And after a while, that just had a snowball effect to where, hundreds of thousands of people were playing this game in hopes of making some money.
So now next, remind us about the crash and the aftermath. What about the token design caused fans to leave, and what ripple effects did it have that the Web3 gaming industry is still trying to overcome today?
Yeah, so tokens, the SLP token was earned just in-game by when you won a battle, you would earn SLP. There wasn't really a demand driver at the time. You could use SLP to level up your breed Axies, but the Axies were also an inflationary, there were more Axies coming to the market every day. So there wasn't really a heavy demand driver for that. At its peak, I think this was kind of also coinciding with the top of the bull cycle in the broader market crash. And what people realized was that the tokenomics just weren't sustainable. There weren't enough demand drivers for the token SLP that people were earning from in-game. And, because so many people were earning it and it was inflationary at the time, once people started to sell, it just became, like this huge nosedive in price. And because there was no demand for the token, it was really just a lot of sell pressure on the market. This is definitely still a big issue within Web3 gaming, is finding the right tokenomics to support the in-game economy. And since then, Axie has tried to create more demand drivers within the game, because I think they very quickly realized that this wasn't sustainable. And this is, again, this is a broader challenge in Web3 gaming. It's not easy to create an in-game economy. So coming from Axie's fall and the crash of the SLP token, I think a lot of games that were coming into Web3 are now very aware that they need to create a tokenomics design that balances supply and demand and can create an in-game economy that is sustainable for players.
Okay, so tell us about Ronin's ecosystem today. So how do they make money, and what is their approach to the handful of key strategic decisions that gaming ecosystems must make?
Yeah, so in terms of the key strategic decisions, these are universal across ecosystems, right? So where you choose to focus in terms of go to market and your geographic focus, whether you're going to be focused mainly on mobile games or desktop games, indie versus AAA. And in my opinion, Ronin is targeting areas that are going to lead to outsized growth. So we've seen, the Asian demographic in the Asian gaming market makes up the majority of gamers. I think it's just about 50% of gamers are from that region. Mobile gaming has been growing over the past couple of years and doesn't show any sign of stopping. Most of the gaming revenue, worldwide gaming revenue, comes from mobile. And then indie games versus AAA games. We've seen this rise in indie games, which comes from a preference from Web 2 players for indie games, as well as indie games within Web3 succeeding over the AAA games. There's been a lot of money invested into AAA games, and we really haven't seen the results that people expected to see from these games. There's a lot of issues just in terms of, it takes so long to build, it costs so much money to build, and these things can still flop. So what we've really seen is these indie games that might not be as competitive with the top AAA games from Web 2, they've really gained traction over time. So we've seen these games be the most successful. In terms of Ronin's, economics, they actually make money on a lot of different layers of the stack. So they obviously have their flagship game, Axie. That is not, totally tied into the Ronin ecosystem. Axie has its own treasury, but we've seen Sky Mavis, which is the creator of both Axie and Ronin chain, be able to accrue value from both the applications, the gaming adjacent applications within their ecosystem. So that's the DEX that they have, Katana Swap, that's the Mavis store, that's their NFT launchpad, and that's their marketplace. They take a fee on all transactions throughout all of those verticals, as well as providing validators for the network. So being able to make revenue on the actual validation of the network, and then obviously transaction fees that come from Ronin. So what they've been able to do is vertically integrate the entire ecosystem to make sure that they are accruing revenue from each layer of that stack.
Chris, in the report, you said that Ronin has seen good growth in the fundamentals of a few of its new titles. Can you walk us through the specifics here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's an imperfect metric, but one of the key metrics that we have is unique active wallets. So that means every time someone signs into the game with their wallet, that gets counted as a unique active wallet. And we've really seen a strong growth, specifically within a few titles within the Ronin ecosystem that have pushed the overall growth of the ecosystem. So we've seen Apeiron, we've seen Pixels, and we've seen Wild Forest being the three that stand out there. And these titles have gone from, for example, with Pixels, it went from only a couple thousand users to at its peak, 1 million daily active users. And this is really incredible growth for Web3 gaming, as most games don't even make it past 10,000 unique active users. And, there's a combination of things here, right? So there's airdrop campaigns, which obviously influence, people coming onto a game and trying to play for that airdrop. But if you look at a game like Pixels, after the completion of their airdrop, obviously they did, demand did go down a little bit and they didn't have as much unique active wallets, but they really retained a lot of those players. After the airdrop completed, I think they dipped down from around 1 million to maybe 600,000 unique active wallets, which is still far more popular than other Web3 games. So we've seen Ronin be able to incite demand through just these kind of classic go-to-market airdrop campaigns, but then also retain demand over time, which indicates to me that these games are actually finding product market fit within communities.
So, what has Ronin changed or developed since Axie Infinity?
So when Axie Infinity first came out, it was the only game on the Ronin network. Really, Axie was originally launched on Ethereum, but they quickly discovered that transaction fees were going to be far too high for this game to scale. So Axie was the flagship game. They designed all the infrastructure of Ronin Network to support Axie. And since Axie, they've brought on other games into the ecosystem. So really what started as one game has now expanded into 20 games. And what we've seen is they have been very careful about curating which games come onto the network and the pace, the cadence that the games have come on. Originally, when they opened it up to third-party developers, they introduced 5 games to the network. Since then, they toss in a game maybe every month, every 2 months, to try to balance that player demand with the supply of games on the network. And as this has developed, they've added, components to the network that have also been able to accrue value back to Ronin and back to Sky Mavis. So opening up the NFT marketplace, when a new game comes on, they can launch their NFTs through the NFT launchpad, and then also they can be traded on the marketplace. As new tokens come onto the network, they'll be traded on Katana DEX. So they've really built out this infrastructure that supports more games coming onto the network. Recently, they launched 7 new games through their Ronin Forge program, which is a builder program for games that want to become part of the Ronin ecosystem. And they've also acquired games from other ecosystems. So these 2 ways of acquiring games, both through internal builder programs and outside acquisitions, have really driven a lot of growth in Ronin.
Realistically, it seems to me like there are some pretty significant hurdles that Web3 gaming as a whole has to get over. Community perception is an incredibly important factor in gaming, as it's a social experience at its core. And the distribution hurdles set by Steam and Apple really make distribution challenging. So, is it realistic to expect these games to break out in a similar way to Axie Infinity?
So those are obviously some of the biggest hurdles for Web3 gaming in general. I think, with games, distribution is king. And having that lack of distribution, the closed off channel of Steam, and then Apple also making it very difficult to trade NFTs and for games to accrue value, that is very challenging for the sector as a whole. In terms of games breaking out in the same way as Axie, we've seen games break out in this way. We saw Pixels break out in this way, which is a browser-based game. And what we see from Ronin is they are opening up their own distribution channels that support, like a cohesive way that players can find these games and play these games on these platforms. In terms of Steam, most games on the Ronin network are not, the types of games that you would find on Steam anyways. And in terms of Apple, they found creative workarounds. So obviously Google has become more developer friendly for Web3. Apple still does have that hang up. But within the Ronin wallet, you can even see that some of these games that would be on a mobile app are now, you can play them on mobile through a browser experience. So Pixels is a great example of this. You can play Pixels within the Ronin wallet browser. So it becomes this place that games can aggregate there, and you can be playing these games through mobile, even though launching via the traditional app store might have some hangups. We've also seen creative workarounds within games like, for example, Axie Infinity. They've launched their own mobile app on Apple, but the way that they've done it is they comply to the regulations by taking all of the NFT transactions off mobile and into a browser marketplace. So you can play with these NFTs within the mobile app, but the actual trading of it's going to be outside of it. So while there are these limitations in distribution, I think that so far Ronin has enabled really creative workarounds. And this is an issue the entire Web3 gaming industry is going to have to deal with. But I can see, Ronin having a successful breakout game in this way. Additionally, there's obviously been a proliferation of Web3 games on Telegram, which we've seen. Telegram is an amazing distribution channel. I think Ronin is tackling it in a similar way. And they also have games that are coming out on Telegram using that distribution channel.
Chris, great to have you on the pod. Thanks.
Thank you. This episode was produced by Steve Bichimer, based on my report, Run It Back, the revival of Ronin's Web3 gaming empire from Messari Pro in September 2024. To read more about Ronin, Axie Infinity, and Web3 gaming, please consider subscribing to Messari Pro at messari.io.